Want to discuss more about what the jury saw today, especially from Judge Juan Merchan. Juries often take cues from judges, and today this jury saw a judge, particularly in the early session, visibly frustrated with prosecutors and their witness, Stormy Daniels. Her early testimony included details about sexual positions and whether the former president used a condom. He didn't. This judge later said there were some things, quote, better left unsaid. However, those details and other denials or things that Daniels talked about may boost the credibility of her claim of having sex with the former president. It's a claim he's consistently denied and lies at the heart of the charges against him. Joining us is jury consultant Alan Tuerkheimer. How do you think the jury responded to Stormy Daniels' testimony?
Jurors sacrifice a lot. They give up their time, their families, their jobs, and it's difficult. They have to hear the information in a case. They don't get to sit around and talk to people about it. It's stressful. And when I talk to them after verdicts, the number one thing they usually tell me that irks them about the process is that time was wasted or when something was inefficient. That really bothers them. And I think that looking at the testimony today, I think there was some extraneous testimony that she went into, some of the details that you just highlighted, maybe a few jokes, which I don't think should ever be made in court. And so I think that bothered the jurors. Now, they would tend to give her a free pass, unlike somebody like Michael Cohen, who would do the same. But I do think it bothered them. And if you think about it, the prosecution, in its opening statement, had some pretty stark language. They talked about a conspiracy, cover-up, scheming, that kind of thing. And so they really want to elevate and have jurors think that this is serious stuff. So anytime there's a moment of frivolity in the courtroom, or if that goes on for a while, I think that hurts the prosecution and helps the defense.
There was reporting that, Stormy Daniels was addressing the jury and made sort of jokes, and they didn't seem to respond. And people in the courtroom said, and Caitlin, you can talk about this, that it didn't seem to land well with the jurors, right?
Because it was such a tense environment and such a serious subject that she was talking about.
Yeah, I don't think there's really any circumstance. I know you mentioned earlier if something isn't planned and there's a little humor, yes, it's a good time to release. Jurors can laugh at that. But any kind of planned humor, it's just the courtroom is not the place for that. And I think they probably picked up on that. And if they maybe smiled or looked at each other, whatever happened, I don't think that they appreciated that.
When on cross-examination, when she was asked if she hated Donald Trump and she said yes, do jurors appreciate that honesty, you think? Or or do they suddenly now question her motives?
I think some of them, I think a little bit of both. I think they probably appreciated it, but also thought, well, what is her reason for testifying? What is she here for? And I know there was the discussion earlier about cross and direct. Maybe she was more credible. I think, Norman, you were talking about this. I think, to me, the big thing is that if your demeanor changes from direct to cross, the jury's not going to think that you're that credible. They're going to question how truthful you are, how believable you are, and how likable you are. So whether or not, whatever she said during the cross that maybe she didn't touch on during the direct, if the demeanor changes and it's a different person, that's going to hurt her credibility.
Apparently, she was at times talking directly to the jury. Do you have a view? Some witnesses, when answering questions, answer to the jury, and others answered to the lawyer. Do you think one of those is the correct approach?
I think being natural is the best. So I like it when a client, if somebody says, could you explain to the jury, then you look at the jury. I think it's unnatural, and jurors get a little weirded out by it. If the lawyer and the witness are talking, and then every time there's an answer, they pivot and look at the jury, I don't think that's natural. I think it's good to try to at least elicit and prompt them to look at the jury so that the jury feels like they're having a conversation.
Can I ask your opinion about having two lawyers on the jury?
Yes. So it was not inadvertent, certainly. And it's very interesting. This is a white-collar type of logical, accomplished jury. They're salespeople.
It's not a Bronx jury, that I can tell you.
And so maybe not that atypical for New York County, but yeah, the lawyers are going to have probably undue influence. It's interesting that they're two. Now, I don't know. They didn't run out of strikes because they were chosen in the first 7, so maybe one side thought the other would burn a strike on a lawyer or the other. Either way, though, I think maybe the thinking is these lawyers are going to strictly adhere to the law.
What would you counsel the Trump attorneys, regarding the lawyers? Would you have told them to strike them, or would you say, I think in this case it's okay to keep them on?
I think it's okay. I think that a lot of times lawyers, they've seen situations where ethics maybe were questioned and maybe some shady things going on, and they can distinguish that between illegality, and maybe that's the hope. They're not going to get bamboozled by some of the salacious details of what's going on in this case. So it's always risky, and it's interesting that there's not only one but two lawyers on this jury, for sure.
Susan Neckles, the Trump attorney, at one point during her cross-examination said to Stormy Daniels, you aggressively rehearsed for this with the prosecution, didn't you? And Stormy Daniels pushed back on the characterization. You know, she said she did go over her testimony with them. I wonder, though, how the jury hears that. People who may not know how prosecutors do work with the witnesses that they call of what they're going to say.
I think most jurors know that witnesses do prepare. And in a way, it shows that they're taking it seriously. And I know they didn't get into that. So I don't think that was too much of a surprise. But most jurors do make that inference that if you're going to get up and testify a case like this, you're certainly going to prepare for it. And rehearse is a word maybe she wanted to use. That wouldn't be the word that Stormy Daniels would use.
I think that's a Susan Nicholas tactic.
Yeah.
So I've heard judges say when that line of cross-examination comes up, judges just interject. There's nothing improper
Objection,
about.
Your Honor. Objection. I didn't ask you. Nobody asked you to say that, Judge. No one asked you to interfere, Your Honor. There's no question.
You can't object to the judge.
Judge, what are you doing? Judge, what are you doing, Judge? Nobody asked you to say
Speaking
that.
of judges, I think it's
I have
accurate.
no idea what he's talking about. Did you answer my question?
I'm not sure. I think the one thing, this wasn't your question, but the one thing I think in terms of that's related to that, I think when Hope Hicks said that she was nervous, that's something that I think is, and you've heard that, I'm sure, where that's something the jury can relate to. So when that's elicited, the jurors can appreciate that. That brings them down to earth a little bit. And it's true that someone like her, she's not used to testifying, but there's a fine line between that and saying, now you rehearsed for this, and basically the implication is your attorneys either told you what to say or you know what to say and they told you how to say it.
Well, often the first thing I say, if it's not my witness or it's cross-examination, I'll say, Miss Daniels, I'm like, this is the first time you and I have ever spoken, correct? Correct. That's not true with the prosecutor, correct? Correct. Could you tell me approximately how many times have you met with him? And on what dates? And what was the first time you met with him? What was the second time? And the best part is if they're like, well, I don't know. So you met with him so many times that you don't even remember how many times.
But you, as defense, have a right to meet with them and to talk to them about their testimony, which the Trump team hasn't done with all of the witnesses.
Yeah, but they usually, Caitlin,
yeah.
they usually say.
They say no. They
right,
usually
they
say
no. Thank you.
But why would the defense counsel not want to meet with some of the other witnesses?
You would definitely want to,
So
but
why
usually
didn't
they say no. They say, no, I'm not going to meet with you. I'm not going to talk to you. The lawyer doesn't reach out himself.
But what if there's no outreach?
The lawyers, there's no way for that to really get. I don't recall a prosecutor saying, well, did Mr. Aidala ever try to talk to you?
No, I'm asking if Todd Blanche and Trump's other attorneys have the right to reach out to some of these witnesses that we've seen to talk to them about what they're going to say on the stand, and they didn't do that. Why would they not have done that?
Well, can't answer that question, but usually I would ask my investigator, hey, pick up the phone and see if Stormy Daniels will talk to us. 1 out of 100 times a witness says
Right,
yes.
but you think it's a good idea, is what I'm saying.
Oh, absolutely. If you can, if they're willing to talk to you, but they usually don't. But about the nervous thing, when I put a witness on the stand, I would say, are you nervous right now? They'll say, yeah. I say, you know what? So am I a little bit, but we'll get through this together.
It's humanizing.
Well, Alan, I keep coming back to what you were saying about the jury and all the angst that went into constituting this jury in the first place. They understand the stakes of this case. And I think a lot of them probably understand how their lives are probably going to change after all of this. When Stormy Daniels inserts this implication that there are vendettas at play here, hers, maybe Michael Cohen's later, how does the jury react to that when they know that there is, maybe they're not following the news, but the president of the United States, the guy who used to be president, is sitting right there. They know that there's a political implication.
Right. I think because of who these jurors are, and they've lived here they've known Trump for 40 years. And so I don't think that they are shocked by that. The conscience of the jury is not shocked when they hear that information. It's something that if they hear once or twice, they might think, oh, wow, that's interesting, and they want to know how it relates to the case. But to that, I just don't think it's that big of a powerful point that they're trying to make. I do think the jurors are wondering how everything's going to connect to the verdict questions that they're supposed to answer. And that'll be really interesting. I haven't seen those actual questions. I want to know what they are, because you might have a jury that is prone to convict, or they think maybe they side with the prosecution. They read the law verdict form and they don't, or the other way around. They side with the defense and they read the questions and think, oh, maybe this means that we should convict. So that'll be really interesting, too.
Alan Tuerkheimer, thank you so much. Really good to have you and everybody in the panel. Thank you. Appreciate it. Ahead, how President Biden today